Said the nurse. All right, another joke. Another joke. Come
Irene's time was near. The hospice people and the nurses were actually surprised that she was still with us. They had expected her to pass during the night. Yet even though her pulse was almost nothing, Irene's heart continued to beat. We wondered, both to ourselves and aloud, what Irene might be waiting for. What unfinished business was keeping her here? I had known Irene forever. I called her my other mother. We first met when I was just 2 years old, and she saved me from a certain death, or at least a good bump on the head. My family had just moved in across the street from the Youngs, and Irene told the story of her hearing a little voice calling, "Stuck! Stuck!" She followed the sound and found my 2-year-old self upside down, hanging from my knees on the porch banister. She got me out of danger and placed me upright, and thus began a friendship that would last for decades. With Irene's son and daughter being 1 year apart from my brothers and me, our families meshed perfectly. During the 1970s, there was a magic bubble that encapsulated the 300 and 400 blocks of North Spring Avenue in LaGrange Park, and we lived in that magic space. Doors were never locked, neighbors gathered in yards and on porches, and we kids belonged to everyone. And Irene's kitchen was the vortex of that enchanted world we lived in. High school kids brought their homecoming dates to hang out with her after the dance. And if you were troubled, a cup of coffee and a listening ear were always available, no matter what time of night you showed up at the door. No matter how stuck I got in my life, Irene was always there to set me upright again. Next door to the Youngs lived the Rowlands. Harry Rowland was a local legend, an honest-to-God train engineer who looked every inch the part. Actually, he looked like Santa in an engineer suit. With his full white beard, engineer's cap, and striped overalls, Harry could often be found at Irene's, guitar in hand, leading sing-alongs with anyone lucky enough to be in the vicinity. Kids of all ages joined the adults for afternoons and evenings of laughter and song. Irene was a legend herself, although she never would have admitted it. Part of what made her so special was that she didn't think she was special, but she made everyone else feel as though they were the most amazing person who had ever graced the planet. Sent to America as a young girl, Irene had been conceived during an air raid and born in Germany to a father that would not claim her, a mother that didn't want her, and dumped on an American relative who really seemed to have no use for her. A short, stout German woman with an easy smile, mischief in her eyes, and an infectious laugh. Irene didn't drive, but she loved to travel, and she did so extensively. She had an eye for jewelry, and when I was 17 and applying to my first real job, Irene told me that no matter how broke you were, or how shabby your clothes might be, if you had a few good pieces of jewelry, you could tie everything together and look like $1,000,000. She was a collector. Besides jewelry, she collected African art, Buddhist statues, handbags, and socks, among many other items. But even more than those things, Irene collected friends. People just never forgot their encounters with this amazing lady. Knowing her was a gift and a treasure. But now, the cancer that Irene had fought so hard was winning. And in those final few weeks, Irene seemed to know it. As her pain began to get intolerable, she began checking off a last day's to-do list. Last trip downtown to the city, last outings to the places she loved, last visit to her beloved library where she worked for 25 years. And soon after came the day of the family meeting with the doctor. The day the doctor said there was really nothing more to be done but to make sure that her affairs were in order. And I believe that's when Irene knew it was okay to let go. Not long after that meeting, she was brought to the hospital and placed in a regular room where the staff tried, momentarily and in vain, to limit her visitors to 2 to 3 at a time. But word had gotten out and people were coming, and there would be no stopping them. No limiting them to 2 or 3 or 6 or 10. Irene's love was so great and so far-reaching that before the hospital knew what was happening, we were camped out in the room and down the hall until they really had no choice but to move Irene to a corner suite to try to contain us. Just as we had all gathered in her kitchen over the years, we were now gathered at her bedside. And people kept arriving. They brought food and changes of clothes for the family. Some friends came and went, and some of us came and stayed, going home only to change or take care of a few things before returning to the vigil. Although Irene was no longer conscious, she was never without a crowd surrounding her hospital bed. And when the hospice workers told us that time was probably near, each of us got a chance to spend some time alone with her to say our goodbyes. There were many tears in those hours, but also so much laughter as we recounted some of the many adventures Irene had. From being chased by a pack of wild dogs on one of her many trips to Europe, letting little Richie Westrick ride her around the neighborhood on the handlebars of his bike, or being stalked on the beach by a wayward frog who must have taken her attempts to turn him into a prince seriously. And we laughed as we remembered my mother trying to teach Irene to drive on a rural dirt road, but instead she drove us straight through a cornfield. And that was the only attempt I know of to get Irene behind the wheel. Now certain that the time of her passing was imminent, no one wanted to leave that room. As the hours ticked away and day turned to night, we took turns dozing in chairs, on the couch, the floor. No one was leaving. And then someone thought to put some music on. We found a few Johnny Cash songs reminiscent of our sing-alongs with Harry, and we began to sing along to the music, first quietly and then loudly. We held hands, we hugged, we swayed, and we sobbed while we sang. One of the visitors wondered aloud, why Johnny Cash songs? To her recollection, that was not Irene's style of music. But she was a friend from later years, not a part of the legendary Spring Avenue crowd of my childhood. And then Irene's husband, Paul, who along with their daughter, Lisa, were never more than an arm's length away from Irene in those final hours. Paul started to sing, "Good night, Irene." And again we all joined in, tears flowing through the music. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. I don't know how long we stayed that way or how many songs we sang, but night once again turned into day and Irene was still with us. And again we wondered, what was keeping her here? Surely she must be tired, must be ready. The hospital was right next to the train, and each time a freight train rumbled by, we thought, maybe that's Harry, driving Irene's train to the next life. Yet she held on. Then we realized that there was one piece of unfinished business. Irene's only brother, Roman, had left New York by car a few days prior to come and visit. He knew she didn't have a lot of time left, but had no idea she was now in her final hours. Roman did not believe in cell phones or in schedules. He and his wife would arrive when they did. And now we were all certain that Irene must be waiting for him. waiting for her brother to have the chance to say goodbye before she passed on to the next realm. There's no way to contact Roman. We called the motel where he usually stayed when in town, but he hadn't checked in. We thought about just leaving a note on the door, so if and when he showed up, it could tell him to go to the hospital, but Roman would have no idea of knowing how to get there or how urgent it was that he come right away. Meanwhile, I had decided to leave the hospital for a bit, go home and shower, maybe a quick nap. I wasn't home very long before Lisa was texting. She said Mom's blood pressure dropped to near nothing. Did I want to come back? Said I would return right away. But then I had a crazy idea. A completely nuts, what are you thinking idea. But my gut told me to run with it. I went to Paul and Irene's and I took the cordless phone from their kitchen and put it in a bag on their back porch with a note to Roman to call Paul's cell phone immediately. Completely ridiculous plan. My hand was shaking as I scrawled, Roman, use the phone inside this bag to call this number. And then asked my daughter Kate not to leave the house for a while. The plan was this. If Roman arrived at Paul and Irene's, he would see the note on the bag and use the phone in the bag to call Paul's cell phone. Paul would tell him to stay put. Then we would call Kate and have her drive the short distance to Paul's house, pick up Roman and his wife, and race them to the hospital. Completely ridiculous and certain not to work. But it was something, just in case. I headed back to the hospital. I hadn't been back maybe 15 minutes when Paul's phone rang. It was Roman. He was at Paul's, he had seen the note, and he had called. Our crazy plan was put into motion, and Kate had Roman and his wife at the hospital within 10 minutes or so. We met them at the entrance and whisked Roman up to the room where he spent the next 20 minutes alone with his dying sister. Shortly after that, Lisa called us all into the room. It was time. Irene was passing. We gathered around her bed, and I could see her faint pulse in her neck as her heart beat its last beat. Slower, slower, and then nothing. She was gone. She really had been waiting for Roman, and moments after that last heartbeat, a freight train passed, and magically, the engineer laid on his horn. And we knew that Irene was on her way. Her train had finally come.
Mary O'Malley.
Have snow and mistletoe and presents under Christmas.